was raised, I'm going to share actually two things. I'm going to mention some other stuff about when I did come to Christ, some of the challenges and so forth, okay? So I was raised in a Muslim Sunni family in Canada. You may have guessed I'm from Canada. Hey. Yeah. Hey. Yay. No, alright, so I was raised in a Muslim Sunni family in Canada. My family comes from Guyana. My grandfather was imam there for 50 years. That's like a pastor but for a mosque. So he educated like the entire village, like villages. Everyone knew his name. And we were originally from Calcutta, which is India. So raised in a Muslim family, like even when I was little, in the month of Ramadan, I'll wake up very early and I'll see my mother in the kitchen preparing a meal. And Ramadan is the month of fasting, so you eat when the sun is down, basically. So when it's up, you have to fast, you can't swallow your saliva, everything. So from 5 years old, basically, I'll wake up really early, I'll see my mother in the kitchen, and she's rushing, getting everything together, because she wants to honor God. So I want to go ahead and just help her. I mean, who just want to watch their mother do that, right? So because of that, I'll begin fasting half days, then full days, and so forth from an early age. Now the mosque, it wasn't the best place to be. It was very religious. You have to do these things, but it got me out of the house, got me hanging with my daddy. Two things I like to do, so I did it. So I'd always go to the mosque and so forth. They put me on madrasa. Madrasa is like a Saturday Sunday school to teach you Arabic and chapters of the Quran to memorize by head and heart, right? So that's briefly my upbringing here. And then as I started maturing and so forth, we were going to move down to Florida. And I mean, in this transition, I had some baby cousins that really, really looked up to me. I was always the one that run off in the mouth. I would get in trouble, but I would get away with it just the way I could talk and so forth. So, I mean, they really looked up to me. They're only 1-2 years younger than me, but really looked up to me. And at our age, I was 13 at the time, they were maybe 11 and 10 or something. And people our age were passing away. People were overdosing, there were car accidents on the snow and all this other stuff. So I'm like, I need to set an example for them. I need to take care of them. I'm not even going to be there. So who you look for example? I already knew I can't look to just man because man fails. I already figured that out. But I had to look to God. So when I got down to Florida, I started praying 5 times a day, reading the Quran a lot more fervently to try and understand it better. And this is when a lot of questions started, etching in my mind. There were a lot of things about women in Islam that didn't make a ton of sense at all. I would show my mother. She'd be like, don't ask me, ask your father. My father would be like, all right, whatever, go to the mosque, ask them. So I'm like, fine. I went to the mosque, I would ask them. They would give you like an answer. There would be many things about offensive stuff and so forth, so on, about many different issues. And they would give you an answer. But when you get home, you just read again. That can't be it. It just can't be it. So I came to a point where I'm like, okay, Muslims don't know quite anything about this. They don't know what they believe, what have you. We believe in God, God is good. And I had Christian friends, but in short, from 13 to 17, these Christian friends had a better relationship with me than with Christ. So, but if I had a flat tire, they'll be there, they'll go ahead and put a spare on my tire, they'll help me out, obviously, right? So they were definitely there. God bless them. And the thing is, as this was happening, I would just look at their lives. They couldn't give me anything back. And all honesty, with just a little bit of knowledge I had about the Quran, maybe I could even convert or get someone to say Shahada, some of the Christian friends I had. But I had a friend who's from Syria. He's a Christian, and he was sitting down with me. He was in the car next to me, and he was like, hey, there's a guy. He comes from Egypt. He specializes in converting Muslims to Christianity. I'm like, that's pretty dumb. And he was like, do you want to meet him? I'm like, no, better things to do with my time. No one understands this stuff. And he's like, oh, well, dude, there's a place that has like a lot of pizza and soda. How much? It's free. Let's go. So we go out there. We went to Chuck E. Cheese's. And back at Chuck E. Cheese, he made me bring my Quran. I was like, okay, this is kind of weird. Why would I bring a Quran to this place? Whatever. It gets me free pizza. So anyways, I go there. There's a guy in the back of the Chuck E. Cheese. He's bald, a little shorter, very stocky. I'm like, that's the guy you were telling me about. That's the little Arab dude. He's like, yeah. So anyways, the guy's name is Usama. I made fun of him for 10 minutes just because his name. And then I sat down in front of him, and then, he got to know me a little bit of my background. I think he figured I was confused about Islam, didn't know much about Islam, and so forth. And he just really open up, like, Imtiaz, do you believe Islam is a loving, peaceful religion? I'm like, yeah. What kind of dumb question is that? I was 17, very arrogant. And then he was like, okay, well, do you believe that a peaceful, loving God loves everyone? I'm like, yes. Well, do you believe Allah is a peaceful, loving God? Yes. What are you getting at? I want to eat my pizza. He's like, okay, then show me that Allah loves sinners and I'll convert to Islam right now. That was the challenge he put out. So I picked up the Quran, like, bet, let's do it. So I picked up the Quran and I began to read through it. For an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And it got to such a point that he was like, just find the word love. We're getting bored. And the word love is in the Quran, completely different context, not that agape love of action, more conditional love. Completely, but I couldn't even find it at that moment. And to help you understand in this time, we started comparing other things because we started exploring a little more about the Quran. Surah 3, Al-Imran, it says that a bunch of angels come to Isa, or come to Mary, so she was going to have a righteous son being Isa, who was supposed to be Jesus. In Surah 19, Al-Maryam, it says there was God's Spirit, so it looked like contradiction. A bunch of angels, then God's Spirit. Which one was it? And then even the content is completely different we explored. In the book of Job, there are 42 chapters in the Bible. There are only 3 verses in the Quran. One is his name. How much do you really know? And then those details about what it says about women in Islam, Surah 434, Surah 4, just all throughout Surah 65, the chapter about divorce, I started getting my answers, and it wasn't very pretty. And then we started relating Sahih Muslim, Sahih Bukhari, Tafsir, and so forth. And in these moments, I just wanted to help you guys understand, this Quran that I was using was the Quran that I kept in the corner of my room ever since I was a kid. This was a Quran that my mother would make the ceremonial washings before you do prayer or read the Quran. And then she would pick it up, kiss it, and put it down and read it. And then kiss it again and put it down. This was something to cherish. I always thought there was something valuable within the Quran for me. But there was nothing. There was nothing to back up the claims that I had, nothing to defend the thoughts that I had. And honestly, this is what's going on in my mind. Islam's right. Allah is a peaceful, loving God. Peaceful, loving God won't say that. That's not peaceful, loving either. Then Allah can't be a peaceful, loving God. Then He can't be God. Then there is no God. God is dead. And it was just a moment of complete darkness. It just felt like complete dark. Like everything, to compare it to how we would believe is all the faith you have putting into Christ to find out that it was fake. It was a fairy tale or something like that. To find out He never died on the cross or what have you. And just make sure, beyond shadow of the doubt, it all hit you at one moment. That's what it felt like. Complete darkness. And Arabs, if you don't know, maybe the missionary friends, they're a little bit louder. Many of them are. And he's right here talking to me, but his voice is like a whisper. It barely gets in. Because my mind is internalizing all this stuff. And then the Holy Spirit just gave him something. And it was Imtiaz, the true living God has chosen to show Himself to you. He loves you and He wants to go ahead and save you and introduce you to Him and save your family and just use you to show the world about His love. Some of that magnitude, and I was rocked. It felt like, it really feels like how someone tells you a joke and you sit there for half an hour and then you begin chuckling to yourself like, I got it. And they look at you and like, you're a little slow. And I felt like God was looking at me at that moment like, yeah, you're gonna get it. Come on, slow. It took 5 years though. I mean, I'll call you Sam at 7 o'clock at night and be like, yo, so what does this mean in Leviticus? He's like, oh, Imtiaz. Okay, we would talk from 7 o'clock to like 4 a.m. You know, this guy did not get tired. We talked and talked and talked, and the most profound things were this. I don't even remember several of the pieces of the content, but he would say, Imtiaz, I had people praying for you in other states. You had people praying for you all across the country. I was like, man, I only pray for people I love, you know? Come on. But that was a big part of it. The second part of this is, I graduated high school when I was 17. I got my degree when I was 20. I started working finances. Well, let me back up here. In high school, before I graduated, I was 17, and 3 months, one night of each month for 3 months, I would have fallen into a nightmare. Now, the nightmare is this. I'm just laying down on the bed, still dead asleep, and then I just wake up and I just see things like levitating in the room, like rocks, all this other stuff, and there was just a haunting presence. If you experience it, you know it's just haunting, just falls completely on you, the moment of weakness, and you're in a dream, you can't move, but I just felt like my vision turned. Not physically, but something else, maybe spiritually. And I just saw this thing hovering above me that was just dressed up like the perfect figure what you think death would dress up like, in the black robe, and he outstretched his hand above me. And just with his hand outstretched above me, I felt like my chest crush. It was just heaving, torturing, and I couldn't move. I was heaving, and it was burning. It felt like 6-7 hours of this, and then, you know, I struggled so much, and it felt like it just collapsed, and then I just wake up, basically. And my chest is heaving, it's hot, it's heated. And I'm like, whoa. And that happened, like, by the last month that it happened, the one night out of that month before I graduated, whether in May or June or whatever, I just opened my eyes in the dream. I knew exactly what was going to happen, so I was ready for a battle from that single moment. And it happened, and we just wrestled all the way through. Now, when I graduated and I finished my degree, I went to work in finances, and they would do Bible studies on a Wednesday morning. I'm like, okay, I studied a little bit of the Quran now, I studied a little bit about the Bible, I understand this stuff somewhat, so let me go, maybe it's going to be motivational or something, right? So, I go into the conference room type thingy, and they're talking, they say some stuff, and it looked like they even contradicted each other with some of the things, so I'm like, whatever. And as I'm over there, before we depart, they say, memorize a memory verse. Like, what's a memory verse? We memorize chapters. So, I memorized Psalm 23. I didn't know what a verse was. I was like, chapters, whatever. So anyways, I'm a little older now, and I'm laying down on a bed. Those are my feet. And have you guys, different demographics, The Exorcist and The Ring. Freaky little white girl, well, with the white dress, edit that out. With the dress and the black hair. You guys know what I'm talking about? Nod your head. Good. Alright, so she has her knees up and she's leaning against the bed. And she just reaches back to grab onto my hand. And just the falling of this haunting presence, and she was moaning, groaning, and she was down here, and it didn't look like anything was moving, but I saw this from first person, second person, and third person. From first person, here's the edge of the bed, and you see her head like that. The black, here. And then third person, you see her, then you see me. So I saw it all at once at the same very time. And her hand reaches back to reach out to me, and it feels like there's a vibrating force that represents somewhat of a bond between us. And the more that I pull, it feels like a thick rubber band against my hand and her hand. So the more that I pull, I feel like I can't let go at any second or it's going to snap back. And I'm so exhausted, it's a dream again, you can't move. And her moaning and groaning was right in the air. And right here, and it was just haunting and oppressing, and it was taunting me. And I'm pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling for like 6-7 hours, and then it just felt like I'm out of energy, I got one last thing in me, I felt like I was making progress, so I finally pulled. And that little vibrating force that was holding us like this, it broke. It's like the rubber band broke, so I feel like I'm free. I'm laying there perfectly still, and I felt like I was free for just a second. But I realized, I'm still in this nightmare, and worst of all, she's still there. And I realized this one thought comes in my mind. She's free too. And she stands up. She leans over the bed to reach out and just grab me. And I'm exhausted. I had no more might of my own. And out of all the surahs of the Quran that I memorized, out of many of them, Ladul Kursi, Al-Fatiha, many of them, what comes to my lips is, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down by green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the path of righteousness for His name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You know, in my head, how does it go? My rod and my staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. My cup overflows, for surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I said that maybe 10-14 times, and this thing started moaning and groaning and screaming, and when I mentioned the rod and the staff, they comfort me, she screamed differently. I sensed it, I knew it. And then after 10-14 times, it was just gone. And I felt like a heavyweight champion. I feel like I knocked something out. So I'm jumping around like, yeah. So I ran upstairs, I got my phone, I'm like, call up all my Christian friends, like, yo, you never guess what happened? They're like, it's kind of late, okay, I'll call you later. So, anyways, one calls me back and I go over there and we talk and whatever. But I talked to Usama, I had another question like, yo, what about, you know, when he was on the cross, why did he scream, my God, why you forsake me? I still had all these questions. He was like, have you read Psalm 22? Come on. And then I went back there, reread and so forth. And he just said, Imtiaz, I've taught you all I could teach you about Islam and Christianity. You just gotta ask God, whoever He is, to show up. So I sat down in my room, got down on my knees, I was like, God, I don't care if you're Ganesh, that would be kind of weird for me, but you know, I'll worship you. If you're Allah, I already know this, I know this stuff, I'll do it. If you're Jesus, that means you're like a man God, I still don't get it, but if that's who you are, great. And you know, there was a conclusion there, a resolve. So then when I went to a financial conference, and the financial conference, they did somewhat of a service on Sunday morning, and they had about 10,000 people or so in there. And then afterwards, I was sitting there anticipating, like, something's gonna happen here. I'm not sure. Something's gonna happen. So anyways, they did an altar call at the ending. I'm sitting in my butt in the seat, and I look over at some of the people that, you know, I thought would help me, like, come on, ask me to go up, I'm ready now, I'm ready now. And they're sitting there like, looking up there like, there's something there for me too. I'm like, you're not gonna help me. So I'm sitting there, and then one guy stands up beside me, he's like, does anybody want to go up there? And like, more people than in this room all stood up at the same time. We went up there, and we just prayed and accepted Christ. And there was just tremendous peace. Many of you guys have experienced that peace, you know? And it was just tremendous peace. And I didn't know what it meant for my finances, relationship. I just knew Christ was God. That's all. That's good enough for me. He loved me more than I loved anyone ever in my life. He was loving my soul after my heart. Beautiful. I was His first love. He had more wonderful thoughts about me than all humanity from beginning to now has had about anything. He loves me. So I went there on the balcony. I saw the sun rising. I called up Usama. I'm like, yo, Usama, I gave my life to Christ. He's like, wow. He's like, man, I never thought I'd believe this. I think that's what he was thinking. But, no documentation. But he was there. He's like, thank you. It would be my honor to baptize you and so forth. And I only learned this maybe just last year. After I put down that phone with him, he had 2 minutes, and then he was going to get on stage and talk to a church on why it's important to witness to Muslims. You know, he was more excited than me. I didn't know him. But since then, God's been grooming me, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, I spent a lot of time thinking, because sometimes I think we rush through life, and so much has happened. I mean, that was August 4, 2008, at about 10 a.m. I gave my life to Christ. I started retracing my steps. And I went from Islamic legalism to Christian legalism to getting a small grasp of grace, understanding, comprehending, experiencing in different facets of my life. And I just need to talk to you guys a little bit about what it was like for the family. We're talking about culture? Okay, let's stop. I made some bullet points. I slept on different couches. It was hostile. It was funny too, because my mom, I'd be like, where's my Bible? She's like, I don't know. And she hid it. It took like 2 months for me to find my Bible. I love her, she's sweet. But anything, it would get hostile. I'm like, do I eat halal? Is that sacrifice to an idol? Is it this? Is it that? And it would cause friction, unnecessary friction in the household. And then, you know, my uncle would argue with me. I have some very, very religious side of the family. Some are studying in Beirut and this and that. And one of my uncles, God bless his heart, he came over, he's like, hey, you know Trinity is not in the Bible? I'm like, yeah, it is. So, yeah, it took time for me to be humbled. But, because I'm like, and then I go to my Christian friends, I'm like, why didn't you tell me it's not in there? They're like, I didn't know. I'm like, gosh. So, anyways, you know, and actually, you know, they would have these questions because we hear things. I remember in 10th grade, I was sitting down at like a table at lunch, and they're talking, did Jesus feed 4,000 people or 5,000? It's a contradiction then. I think he fed both. I had no idea. I was like, Jesus did what? That's crazy. I want to know more. That's what I'm thinking. And they're like, okay, next thing. Hey, if you guys want to buy fries, I'm like, great. So, you know, we always hear things here and there. My uncle had heard that God had rested on the 7th day, so he was like, well, if he rested, did he need a cup of water too? That's the way he was thinking. And I was like, man, how do I understand all this stuff? So more than learning stuff just for whatever mental assent, I had to learn how to share my faith because people had so many questions. So many questions. And friends would only go so far. Usama wouldn't always be available. He would be traveling and so forth. And I'll be forced to read, and I hate reading. But I have to learn how to love it, honestly. And just spending time with God. But to talk to you guys about the church, it was a fun experience getting acquainted. You know, I remember I went into